Amora woke up early in her modest apartment, the morning sun filtering through the thin curtains. It had been a few weeks since she won custody of Alex, but the joy of having him back in her life made the small apartment feel like a palace. She could hear Alex humming a tune in the next room, preparing for his first day at his new school. "Mom, do you think they'll like me?" Alex asked, peeking his head into her room. His face was a mix of excitement and nervousness. Amora smiled warmly, walking over to ruffle his hair. "Of course they will. You're a wonderful boy, Alex. Just be yourself." Alex grinned and hugged her tightly. "Thanks, Mom. I'm glad we're together." "Me too, sweetheart," Amora whispered, holding him close. As they left for school, Amora felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Life was finally starting to feel normal. They walked hand in hand down the bustling streets, the city waking up around them. For a moment, it seemed like everything was perfect, but in the shadows, danger lurked across town. In a dimly lit room, Sarah paced back and forth, her face twisted in frustration. She couldn't stand the thought of losing Alex, the boy she had raised as her own. Her plan to have Alex kidnapped and killed had been thwarted by her own henchmen, who had refused to carry out such a gruesome act. Furious, she decided to take matters into her own hands. "Fools," she spat, slamming her phone onto the table. "If they won't do it, I'll find someone who will." She grabbed a notebook and scribbled furiously, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge. She knew Mr. Mark wouldn't approve, but she was beyond caring. She had already lost too much. Later that day, as Amora was preparing dinner, there was a knock on the door. Alex ran to answer it, but Amora stopped him. "Wait, Alex. Let me see who it is first," she said, her heart suddenly pounding. She wasn't sure why, but a wave of unease washed over her. Peeking through the peephole, she saw a man in a delivery uniform holding a package. His face was obscured by a cap pulled low over his eyes. "Who is it, Mom?" Alex asked, trying to peer around her. "It's just a delivery," Amora said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" "Delivery for Miss Amora," the man said, his voice gruff. Amora hesitated. She hadn't ordered anything. "I think you have the wrong address." The man smiled, a chilling smile that sent shivers down her spine. "No mistake. This is for you." Before Amora could react, the man shoved the door open, sending her stumbling backward. Alex screamed, and Amora quickly pushed him behind her, shielding him with her body. "What do you want?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice calm. The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You need to come with me, quietly. Or else." He pulled out a knife, holding it menacingly in front of him. Alex clutched Amora's shirt, his eyes wide with fear. Amora's mind raced. She needed to get them out of there. "Fast, all right, we'll come with you," she said, trying to keep the man calm. Just let me grab my bag." The man nodded, keeping his eyes on her. Amora moved slowly toward the kitchen, where her purse was. She grabbed it, her fingers brushing against a sharp kitchen knife. Her heart pounded as she carefully slid the knife into her sleeve. "Let's go," the man ordered, waving the knife toward the door. Amora nodded and guided Alex out, her mind working furiously to come up with a plan. As they walked down the hallway, she noticed a group of neighbors coming up the stairs. This was her chance. "Now, Alex," she shouted, spinning around and swinging the kitchen knife at the man's arm. The man yelped in surprise, dropping his knife. Amora grabbed Alex's hand and bolted down the hallway, screaming for help. The neighbors, seeing the commotion, rushed over, surrounding the man, called the police. Amora shouted as she and Alex raced down the stairs. They burst out onto the street, Amora's heart racing. She quickly waved down a passing taxi and pushed Alex inside. "To the police station, please," she told the driver, her voice shaking. As the taxi sped away, Amora held Alex close, her mind reeling from what had just happened. She knew they couldn't stay at the apartment anymore. They needed to be somewhere safe, where Sarah and Mr. Mark couldn't find them. At the police station, Amora explained everything to the officer on duty. She described the man, the attack, and her suspicions about Sarah and Mr. Mark. The officer listened carefully, taking notes. "We'll look into this, ma'am. In the meantime, we suggest you and your son stay somewhere safe." Do you have any family or friends you can stay with? Amora shook her head. No, it's just us. The officer nodded. All right. We can arrange for you to stay in a safe house for now. We'll also assign an officer to keep an eye on you. Thank you, Amora said, relief washing over her. She glanced at Alex, who was sitting quietly next to her, his eyes wide with fear. It's going to be okay, sweetheart, she whispered, pulling him into a hug. We are safe now. But as she held her son close, Amora couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. She knew Sarah and Mr. Mark wouldn't give up so easily. They were determined to get Alex back, no matter what. Over the next few days, Amora and Alex stayed in the safe house, guarded by a kind officer named Maria. She did her best to make them feel comfortable, but Amora couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every sound, every shadow seemed like a threat point. One evening, as Alex was playing with a toy Maria had given him, Amora sat at the small kitchen table, her head in her hands. She felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She missed her old life, when things were simple. When she was just a nanny, and Alex was just a boy. Now, everything was complicated. Hey, are you okay? Maria asked, sitting down next to her. Amora nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just tired. Maria gave her a sympathetic look. I can't imagine what you're going through. But you're strong, Amora. You're doing everything you can to protect your son. Amora sighed. I just wish this would all be over. I want Alex to have a normal life, without all this fear. Maria nodded. I understand. But you're not alone. We're here to help you. Amora smiled, grateful for Maria's kindness. Thank you. Just then, the phone rang. Maria answered it, her face growing serious. Yes, she's here. Okay, I'll let her know. She hung up and turned to Amora. That was the station. They found out who sent the man after you. Amora's heart skipped a beat. Who was it? Maria took a deep breath. It was Sarah. She paid him to kidnap Alex. Amora's blood ran cold. She had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made her feel sick. What happens now? They are going to arrest her, Maria said. But they want to make sure you and Alex are safe first. We are moving you to a more secure location. Amora nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. She just wanted this nightmare to end. Meanwhile, Sarah paced her living room, waiting for the call. She had heard nothing from the man she hired, and it was making her nervous. Mr. Mark sat on the couch, watching her with a frown. What are you doing, Sarah? He asked, his voice low. You're going to get us both in trouble. Sarah shot him a glare. I'm doing what I have to do. I won't let that woman take Alex from us. Before Mr. Mark could respond, there was a loud knock on the door. Sarah froze, her heart racing. Who is it? She called, her voice shaking. Police. Open up. Sarah's eyes widened, and she glanced at Mr. Mark, who looked equally shocked. She quickly ran to the door and opened it, trying to act calm. Can I help you, officers? She asked, forcing a smile. The officers stepped inside, their expression serious. Sarah Mark, you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap. Sarah's smile faltered. What? That's ridiculous. I didn't. We have evidence, ma'am, the officer said, cutting her off. You need to come with us. As they led Sarah away, Mr. Mark watched, his mind racing. He knew things were bad, but he hadn't realized how far Sarah had gone. Now, their lives were falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Back at the safe house, Amora and Alex were preparing to move to the new location. As they packed their things, Amora couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Maybe now, back at the safe house, Amora and Alex were preparing to move to the new location. As they packed their things, Amora couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Maybe now, with Sarah under arrest, they could finally have some peace. But just as they were about to leave, Maria received another call. Her face grew tense as she listened, and Amora's heart sank. What is it? Amora asked, fearing the worst. Maria hung up the phone, her expression serious. That was the station again. They're worried Mr. Mark might try something now that Sarah's been arrested. They're increasing security around the safe house, but we need to move quickly. Amora nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Let's go, Alex, she said, grabbing his hand. We need to be strong, okay? Alex nodded, his eyes wide but determined. Okay, Mom. They hurried out of the safe house and into an unmarked police car. As they drove through the city, Amora couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety. She knew that even though Sarah was in custody, Mr. Mark was still a threat. He had lost everything, and she didn't know what he might do next. The car wound its way through the city streets, eventually pulling up to a nondescript building. Maria led them inside, where a group of officers was waiting. This is Officer Daniels, Maria said, introducing them to a tall, stern-looking man. He'll be in charge of your security from now on. Officer Daniels nodded curtly. We've set up a safe room for you and your son, Ms. Amora. We are going to make sure nothing happens to you. Thank you, Amora said, squeezing Alex's hand. She felt a little safer knowing that there were people looking out for them. They were led to a small room with a few basic amenities. It wasn't much, but it was secure. Amora knew that was what mattered most. Try to get some rest, Maria said, giving Amora a reassuring smile. We'll keep watch outside. Amora nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Thank you, Maria. For everything. As Maria left, Amora sat down on the small bed and pulled Alex close. We are going to be okay, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. We just have to be strong a little longer. Alex nodded, resting his head on her shoulder. I know, Mom. I believe you. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Amora felt a glimmer of hope. They were in this together, and she would do whatever it took to keep her son safe. The next morning, Amora woke up to the sound of voices outside the room. She listened closely, trying to make out what they were saying. Are you sure it's safe? She heard Maria ask, her voice tinged with worry. As safe as it can be, Officer Daniels replied. But we need to be vigilant. Mr. Mark is still out there, and we don't know what he's planning. Amora's heart sank. She had hoped that with Sarah in custody, things would settle down. But it seemed their troubles were far from over. She got up quietly, careful not to wake Alex, and stepped outside. Maria and Officer Daniels were standing by the door, deep in conversation. What's going on? Amora asked, her voice low. Maria turned to her, her face serious. We're just discussing security measures. We need to be extra careful, especially now that Sarah's been arrested. Mr. Mark might try to take matters into his own hands. Amora nodded, understanding the situation. What should I do? Stay inside the room as much as possible, Officer Daniels advised. We have officers stationed outside, but it's better to be cautious. Amora agreed, knowing it was the best way to keep Alex safe. Thank you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Maria gave her a comforting smile. We're here for you, Amora. Just hang in there. As Amora returned to the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She knew that until Mr. Mark was caught, they would never truly be safe. Days passed, and life in the safe house became a routine. Amora and Alex spent most of their time inside, with only brief outings under heavy guard. It was a difficult adjustment, but they managed to find small moments of joy together. One evening, as they were sitting down for dinner, there was a knock on the door. Amora's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly composed herself and went to answer it. To her surprise, it was Mr. Tony, her lawyer. Mr. Tony, she exclaimed, relief flooding through her. What are you doing here? I came to check on you, Mr. Tony said, smiling warmly. And I have some news. Amora ushered him inside, eager to hear what he had to say. What is it? Mr. Tony sat down, his expression serious. I've been working with the police, and we've managed to track down Mr. Mark's whereabouts. He's been hiding out in a hotel, but they are planning to move in and arrest him tonight. Amora felt a wave of relief wash over her. That's great news. Thank you, Mr. Tony. Mr. Tony nodded. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone in this. We are going to make sure you and Alex are safe. Amora smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. I appreciate it more than you know. As Mr. Tony left, Amora sat down next to Alex, who was watching her with wide eyes. Is everything okay, Mom? He asked. Yes, sweetheart, Amora said, pulling him into a hug. Everything's going to be okay. Later that night, Amora lay awake, listening to the sounds of the city outside. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. Even though Mr. Mark was about to be arrested, she knew that things wouldn't be truly over until he was behind bars. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from outside, followed by shouts. Amora's heart leapt into her throat as she jumped out of bed and rushed to the door. Stay here, Alex, she whispered, her voice trembling. She cracked the door open and peeked outside, her heart pounding. She could see shadows moving in the hallway, and the sound of heavy footsteps. Maria, she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. What's going on? Maria appeared around the corner, her face pale. It's Mr. Mark, she said, her voice urgent. He's here. Amora's blood ran cold. How did he find us? I don't know, Maria replied, her eyes wide with fear. But we need to get you out of here. Now. Amora nodded, grabbing Alex's hand. Come on, sweetheart. We have to go. They rushed down the hallway, Maria leading the way. As they reached the back exit, they heard a shout from behind them, stop right there. Amora turned to see Mr. Mark standing at the end of the hallway, a wild look in his eyes. You're not going anywhere, he snarled, advancing toward them. Run. Maria shouted, pushing Amora and Alex toward the door. They burst through the exit and into the alleyway, the cool night air hitting their faces. Amora could hear Mr. Mark's footsteps behind them, getting closer with each passing second. Mom, I'm scared, Alex cried, his voice shaking. I know, baby, Amora said, her heart racing. But we have to keep going. Just as they rounded the corner, they heard the sound of sirens approaching. Amora's heart leapt with hope as a squad car pulled up beside them, officers jumping out with their guns drawn. Freeze, one of the officers shouted, aiming his weapon at Mr. Mark. Mr. Mark stopped in his tracks, his face contorting with rage. This isn't over, he screamed as the officers moved in to arrest him. I get you, Amora. I get you and Alex if it's the last thing I do. Amora watched as the officers wrestled Mr. Mark to the ground, her body trembling with relief. She pulled Alex into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. We are safe now. It's all over. In the days that followed, life began to slowly return to normal for Amora and Alex. With Mr. Mark and Sarah both in custody, they no longer had to live in fear. They moved into a new apartment, far away from the city, where they could start fresh. Alex enrolled in a new school, and Amora found a job working at a local community center. It wasn't easy, but they were together, and that was all that mattered. One afternoon, as they were walking home from school, Alex turned to Amora with a thoughtful look on his face. Mom, do you think we'll ever see Mr. Mark or Sarah again? Amora shook her head, smiling gently. No, sweetheart. They're gone for good. Alex nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Good. I don't want to ever see them again. Amora hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with love. I promise, Alex. Amora hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with love. I promise, Alex. You're safe now. We are safe. We can finally start a new chapter, just the two of us. They walked in comfortable silence, enjoying the peace that had finally settled into their lives. The sky above was clear, and the city buzzed quietly around them, a stark contrast to the turmoil they had endured. As they approached their new apartment building, Alex's face lit up when he saw a familiar figure standing by the entrance. It was Mr. Tony, his face brightening as he spotted them. Mr. Tony. Alex called out, running ahead to greet him. Mr. Tony smiled warmly, bending down to give Alex a hug. Hey there, champ. How's the new school? It's great. I've made some new friends, and I really like my teacher, Alex replied excitedly. Thanks for everything you did to help us. It was my pleasure, Alex. I'm just glad to see you both safe and happy, Mr. Tony said, his eyes meeting Amora's as she walked up to them. Mr. Tony, I don't know how to thank you, Amora said, her voice filled with gratitude. You've done so much for us. Mr. Tony waved his hand dismissively. No need to thank me, Amora. You're a strong woman and a wonderful mother. I'm just glad I could help you get the justice you deserved. Amora smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. We're starting over now, and it feels good. For the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. Mr. Tony nodded. You have every reason to. You've been through so much, but you never gave up. That takes courage. Alex looked up at his mother, his eyes shining with admiration. Yeah, Mom. You're the bravest person I know. Amora's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her son tightly. Thank you, Alex. I couldn't have done it without you. They stood there for a moment, basking in the warmth of the late afternoon sun, their hearts full of hope and love. For the first time in a long while, Amora felt at peace, knowing that they were finally free from the shadows of their past. As they walked into their new home together, Amora knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she and Alex would face them together. They had been through so much, but they had come out stronger on the other side, and as she closed the door behind them, Amora couldn't help but smile, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new, beautiful chapter in their lives.